When my husband handed me a velvet box at his birthday dinner, I thought it was jewelry. Instead, it was a set of divorce papers. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was Damon's 40th birthday, and he'd gone all out. The restaurant was one of the fanciest in Charleston, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and champagne that cost more than my monthly rent. I spent the whole day making sure everything looked perfect, even though he barely spoke to me while getting ready. I told myself he was just nervous about his big night. I had no idea what was coming. When the waiter dimmed the lights and brought out the cake, Damon stood up to give a speech. He talked about new beginnings and fresh chapters. Everyone clapped, thinking it was just another one of his dramatic monologues. Then he looked at me, smiled in that fake camera-ready way, and handed me the little velvet box. I remember my hands shaking as I opened it. I thought it was earrings or maybe a bracelet. Inside was a neatly folded stack of papers tied with a gold ribbon. I started reading, and my throat went dry. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He had given me divorce papers. In front of his friends. His parents. Our colleagues. People gasped. Some laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. But Damon didn't flinch. He just lifted his glass and said, "I figured it's time we both move on." I couldn't speak. My chest felt like it was caving in. I stared at him, wondering if this was really happening, if the man I had loved for 10 years could humiliate me like this. I wanted to cry, scream, throw the papers at him, but I didn't. I smiled. Somehow, I managed to smile and say, "Happy birthday, Damon." He looked surprised, maybe expecting me to break down. I didn't give him that satisfaction. I sat through the rest of the dinner like nothing had happened. People whispered. The room felt like it was spinning, but I held my ground. After the party, I walked out into the cool night air and finally let the tears fall. My marriage was over, but something inside me shifted. The woman who walked into that restaurant had been soft, trusting, and naive. The one walking out was quiet, furious, and already thinking about what came next. That night, I decided I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't cry in front of him. If Damon thought humiliating me in public was his big finale, he was wrong. He had no idea what I was capable of when I was pushed too far. That was the night I stopped being his wife and started planning my revenge. Looking back, I can't remember the exact moment when Damon changed. Maybe it happened so slowly I didn't notice until it was too late. When we met, he was magnetic, confident, funny, and full of charm. He'd walk into a room, and everyone's eyes would follow him. I was 25, working on a hotel renovation, and he was the smooth-talking developer who owned the building. He flirted without shame, and when he asked me to dinner, I said yes before I could think twice. Our first few years together felt like a dream. Damon showered me with compliments, gifts, and promises. He told me I made him better, that I was the reason he worked so hard. I believed every word. I helped him design his offices, planned his client events, and made sure his image matched the success he wanted so badly. While he chased deals, I handled the details that made people trust him. We were a team, or so I thought. Damon cared deeply about what people saw. He'd spend an hour choosing a tie before meetings, talking about how presentation is everything. I used to think it was discipline. Now I know it was vanity. The perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect life. That's what he wanted everyone to see. Behind closed doors, though, cracks were forming. He'd come home late, claiming he was meeting investors. He'd smell faintly of perfume I didn't wear. When I asked, he laughed it off, saying, "You're imagining things, Len." That name, Len. It started small. He used to call me love or honey, soft and familiar. But one day it changed, just like his tone. Len sounded clipped, distant, almost impatient. I told myself it was stress, that his business was growing fast, and he was under pressure. I tried harder to please him, planned his dinners, arranged his meetings, even redid our bedroom to refresh the energy. Nothing worked. His compliments became rare. His phone became a constant companion. He started taking calls in another room, lowering his voice when I walked in. I'd hear snippets, "She doesn't know," or "Keep it quiet for now." My stomach would twist, but I told myself not to overthink. I didn't want to believe that the man who once looked at me like I was his entire world could be lying straight to my face. Sometimes, when we went out, he'd hold my hand for show, his fingers limp in mine. People would smile at us, saying what a beautiful couple we were. And I'd smile back, pretending not to notice how he flinched when I touched him. It's strange how easily you can live inside a lie when you want it badly enough. Damon's life was a stage, and I was just part of the scenery, polished, pleasant, and quiet. But every performance ends eventually. I just didn't know the curtain was already falling. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that starts off ordinary and ends with your world flipped upside down. Damon had left early for a meeting, rushing out the door with his phone still plugged into the kitchen charger. I noticed it buzzing, the screen lighting up with a missed call from Marcy Hale. I knew the name, his assistant, the young woman he'd hired last year. She was polite, always cheerful, always eager to impress. I never thought twice about her. The phone buzzed again, and then a voicemail popped up. I shouldn't have listened. Maybe I wanted to hear something harmless, just to quiet the doubt that had been building inside me. But the moment her voice came through, my stomach turned cold. "Hey, baby," she whispered, her tone soft, intimate. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I know you have to play nice at home for now, but soon it'll just be us. I love you, Damon." My hands froze around the phone. The kitchen went silent, except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ear. I replayed the message once, twice, hoping I'd misheard, hoping it was some cruel joke. But her voice was steady, confident. She wasn't sneaking around. She was sure of him, sure of their future. I felt sick. I sat at the counter, staring at the granite I'd picked out for our forever home. All the memories started flooding back. Damon taking late calls, the perfume that clung to his shirts, the way he'd brushed off my questions with that cold smile. It all fit now, every lie snapping into place. I remembered the first time I met Marcy. Damon had brought her to one of our dinner parties. She'd shown up in a pale blue dress, laughing at all his jokes, refilling his glass before he asked. I'd told him afterward that she seemed sweet, and he'd smirked, saying, "She's efficient." I thought it was just professional respect. How stupid I was. The voicemail kept echoing in my head. "I love you, Damon." I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to break something just to feel the noise match what was happening inside me. But I didn't. I deleted the message and sat there for a long time, staring out the window. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the humiliation of realizing she'd been inside my life the whole time. She'd walked through my home, eaten my food, smiled at me while sleeping with my husband. By the time Damon came home that evening, I'd already decided I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Let him believe I was still the clueless wife. Let him keep lying to my face. If he wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules and beat him at them. That was the moment I stopped asking why and started thinking how. I woke up the next morning with a calm I didn't recognize. The tears had dried, and what replaced them wasn't peace, it was purpose. Damon thought I was blind, and that was exactly how I wanted him to see me. From that moment on, every smile, every soft word, every dinner I cooked was part of an act. If he was going to destroy our marriage in secret, I would destroy his empire in silence. I began paying attention to the things I used to overlook. His office folders left carelessly on the kitchen counter, the laptop he sometimes forgot to close, the manila envelopes labeled with vague words like holdings and reallocations. I started taking photos when he wasn't around. Contracts, balance sheets, property titles, all carrying his signature and in fine print mine. My name was disappearing from everything we owned. It hit me then. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was erasing me. Damon had been transferring our shared assets into his company, using shell accounts and legal loopholes. Every business trip had been another step toward cutting me out completely. I needed help, but not just any help. My father's old friend, Harlan Pierce, had been a lawyer for over 40 years. He'd handled my father's estate before he passed, a man I knew Damon couldn't manipulate. I drove to Harlan's office under the excuse of running errands. The small brick building looked exactly the same, solid, quiet, dependable. When I sat across from him, I didn't cry or tremble. I simply laid the printed photos and copied files on his desk. Harlan studied them slowly, his brow tightening. "He's moving everything," he said finally. "You're about 6 months away from having nothing in your name." Those words should have crushed me, but instead they cleared the fog in my head. "Then we stop him," I said. We began working in secret. Harlan guided me through every step, collecting proof, redirecting certain assets, opening a separate account under my maiden name. Each action was deliberate, careful. At night, I'd lie beside Damon while he snored peacefully, my mind racing with numbers, dates, and plans. I started keeping a small notebook hidden inside my sewing box, disguised among old ribbons and fabric scraps. To Damon, I was still the devoted wife, smiling at parties, asking about his meetings, pretending to believe every lie. Inside, I was building my defense piece by piece. I stopped wearing my wedding ring when he wasn't home, tracing the pale circle it left on my finger like a reminder of what I was losing. Every document I copied, every meeting I arranged with Harlan brought me closer to the truth. Damon might have built his fortune on charm and deceit, but he'd underestimated the woman who helped him build it. I wasn't planning to expose him yet. No, that would come later, when it hurt him most. The invitations arrived a month before the event, thick cream cards with gold lettering, the kind Damon loved. He was turning 40, and he wanted the world to watch him celebrate. He booked an entire ballroom at the Langston Hotel, hired a jazz band, and ordered imported champagne by the case. Every detail screamed excess. He told me it would be his biggest night yet. One evening, while reviewing the guest list, he looked up and said, You'll still come, of course. Just one last time, for appearances. He said it like an instruction, not a question. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Inside, I was already counting down the days. I began working closely with Harlan again, finalizing everything. We had quietly secured my share of the assets, redirected funds into an account only I could access, and gathered proof of his fraudulent transfers. The paperwork was ready, timed perfectly. All that remained was the delivery, and what better stage than Damon's grand celebration. I started preparing for the night like any dutiful wife. I scheduled fittings, picked out a dress, and smiled when people asked how proud I was of my husband. Damon bragged about the event to everyone, talking about new projects, future expansions, and the next chapter of his career. He was so caught up in his performance that he didn't notice my calm detachment. At night, when he fell asleep, I'd sit at my vanity, rehearsing in my head. Not words, timing. The order of everything. When the toast would happen. When the lights would dim. When my turn would come. Every second needed to land perfectly. The day before the party, I visited Harlan one last time. He handed me a sealed envelope and said quietly, "Once this is opened, there's no going back." I slipped it into my clutch and smiled. "That's the point," I said. On the morning of the party, the house buzzed with caterers and florists. Damon was in his best mood, checking arrangements, rehearsing his speech, complimenting himself in the mirror. He looked every bit the successful man he wanted people to see. I helped him fix his tie and said softly, "You'll steal the show tonight." He smirked, unaware of how true that was. By evening, the ballroom glowed under soft lights. Guests arrived in tuxedos and gowns, greeting Damon like royalty. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. I stood beside him, smiling when people commented on how perfect we looked together. He was radiant, confident, ready to bask in his own glory. And I, calm, collected, unreadable, was ready to end his charade. Everything was set. The papers were in place, the timing precise, and the crowd assembled. As the band began to play his favorite song, and the staff wheeled out the towering cake, I looked at Damon across the room. He had no idea that the best gift of the night was still waiting. His downfall, wrapped in my steady smile. The week before the party felt unnaturally still, like the air before a hurricane. Damon was too busy finalizing the guest list to notice how much time I spent alone. That silence became my shield. Every hour he spent at meetings was an hour I used to secure my own future. I gathered what little I could call mine. A few gold pieces from my grandmother, tucked away in a small box behind old scarves. I took them to a quiet pawn shop 2 towns over, exchanging them for cash. The money went straight to Harlan's retainer. Each bill I handed over felt like a piece of my old life burning away. Next came the accounts. I sat at the dining table with my laptop, pretending to browse design magazines, while actually wiring funds through layers of transfers Harlan had arranged. I moved my portion into an account under my maiden name, Lena Harrow. Seeing that name again on official documents stirred something in me. I hadn't been her in years. But now she was returning stronger and smarter. I learned to mask every move. When Damon walked in, I'd close the laptop and greet him with a practiced smile. We ate dinner together, talked about his party, his work, his future. Everything centered around him. I laughed at his jokes, poured his wine, and let him believe I was still his faithful shadow. The more relaxed he became, the bolder I grew. At night, I'd lie beside him, my mind ticking through numbers and plans while his breathing evened into sleep. I used that rhythm as a metronome, counting seconds, reminding myself that patience was my greatest weapon. The woman who once begged for his attention was gone. What replaced her was deliberate and calm. Every detail mattered. The timing of the transfers, the sequence of signatures, even the dates on the document. I checked everything twice, then again, until I was certain nothing could trace back to me. Damon thought he was outsmarting me. He didn't realize I was already 5 steps ahead. I began to notice small changes in myself. My voice steadied. My hands no longer shook when I looked at him. I could meet his eyes without feeling that familiar sting of humiliation. There was power in silence, I learned. Power in pretending to play the part he'd written. On the outside, I was still the perfect wife, composed, graceful, reliable. Inside, I was rewriting the ending. Each day brought me closer to the moment I'd watched unfold in my head 100 times. The look on his face when he realized the control he thought he had was gone. The calm wasn't peace. It was preparation. And the closer the party came, the steadier I felt. Damon was celebrating a milestone. I was preparing for war. The ballroom shimmered beneath a sea of gold light. Chandeliers caught the glint of glass and laughter, scattering it across polished marble floors. Waiters floated between clusters of guests, balancing trays of champagne like moving stars. Damon had spared no expense. Every detail spoke to his vanity. Even the scent in the air, a blend of white lilies and amber, felt rehearsed. I arrived just as the band began their first set, the sound of a saxophone curling through the air. My dress was black satin, simple yet striking, chosen deliberately to blend in and stand out all at once. I could feel eyes on me as I walked through the crowd, polite smiles, whispered compliments. Damon noticed too. He always noticed attention, even when it wasn't his. He looked immaculate in his tailored tuxedo, hair perfectly in place, the picture of charm. When he saw me, his mouth curved into that familiar public smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "There's my lovely wife," he said, loud enough for those around us to hear. I leaned in and kissed his cheek, returning the performance. The room was a showcase: investors, clients, old friends, and people who came simply to bask in his orbit. A jazz trio played softly in the background, glasses clinked, and laughter swelled like waves. Damon moved from one circle to another, shaking hands, cracking jokes, collecting admiration as if it were oxygen. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, observing. Every now and then, he'd glance my way, making sure I was playing my part. I nodded, smiled, and sipped my drink, keeping my face unreadable. Inside, my pulse stayed steady, every beat syncing with the plan I'd set in motion. When the time came for speeches, the lights dimmed slightly. A hush spread through the room. Damon stepped up to the microphone, glass in hand, his voice smooth and confident. "Tonight," he began, "isn't just a celebration of turning 40. It's about transformation, about stepping into freedom, about new beginnings." The crowd applauded, oblivious to the irony. He spoke about ambition, about growth, about taking risks. People laughed when he joked about surviving another year of marriage. I smiled too, just enough for the cameras. Behind him, a large screen flickered with the slideshow he'd prepared, photos of trips, properties, and smiling faces. He basked in his own story, feeding off the admiration that filled the room. He didn't see the faint tremor in my hand as I reached for the envelope inside my clutch. It was almost time. As the applause swelled once more, Damon raised his glass high. "To success," he said, beaming. "To the future." I looked around the glittering room, every guest reflecting a version of him, smiling, polished, hollow. My gaze settled back on the man at the center of it all, the one who had built his kingdom on life. His future, I thought, was about to arrive. The lights dimmed again as the staff wheeled out the towering white cake, covered in gold leaf and sparkler. The crowd clapped, cheering Damon's name. He stood at the center, grinning, soaking in the attention. When the noise began to fade, I stepped forward, heels clicking against the marble floor. "Before we cut the cake," I said, taking the microphone from the MC, "I'd like to give my husband a little something special." My tone was soft, warm, the kind that made people lean in. Damon turned toward me, surprised but amused. "You didn't have to, Len," he said lightly. "You've already given me enough." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the guests. I smiled, fingers steady around the mic. "Oh, I insist," I said. "After all, what's a birthday without surprises?" The projector screen behind us flickered. The slideshow of Damon's photos vanished, replaced by a series of documents, bank statements, contracts, asset transfers. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the show. Then came the signatures, highlighted in neat red circles, his and mine. Murmurs spread like fire through the room. Damon frowned, glancing back at the images as they shifted again. Screenshots of messages, affectionate words, late-night plans, her name written over and over. "Marcy Hale." The laughter died completely. The air thickened. Someone dropped a glass. Damon's jaw tightened. "Lena," he said through his teeth, "turn it off." But I didn't. I kept smiling, my voice calm. "For those who don't know," I said, addressing the crowd, "Damon and I built his company together. Every contract, every deal, my name was there once. But my husband decided I didn't belong in the picture anymore. He moved everything quietly, as if I wouldn't notice." I paused, letting the silence settle. Unfortunately for him, I noticed everything. Gasps rippled again. Damon tried to grab the microphone, but I stepped back. The next slide appeared, an official statement showing that I now held 51% of his company's shares, transferred legally and irrevocably. He froze. The color drained from his face. His fingers twitched around the mic stand, but his voice failed him. The guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. Investors, partners, clients. The people he'd spent years impressing now looked at him like he was a stranger. I took one final step closer, my voice almost tender. "You see, Damon," I said softly, "I just wanted to return the favor. You gave me papers once, remember? Consider this my gift to you." For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, I set the microphone down on the table beside the untouched cake. The candles flickered between us, small, trembling flames. Damon's perfect smile had vanished. What replaced it was raw panic, a look I would never forget. For a long moment, no one in the ballroom moved. The hum of whispers swelled until it broke into uneasy silence again. Damon stood frozen beside the cake, eyes darting between the screen and the crowd. His lips parted as if he could smooth it over, charm his way through the wreckage. But his voice came out sharp, brittle. This is some kind of mistake, he said, forcing a laugh that fell flat. The guests didn't buy it. Some turned away, murmuring excuses as they drifted toward the exit. Others stared openly, waiting for the show to end. Investors exchanged quiet looks, then slipped their business cards back into pockets and purses. The sound of high heels on marble echoed like gunshots as one by one, the people who'd built him up began to walk out. Damon lunged for the projector, yanking the power cord from the outlet. The screen went black, but it was too late. His reputation had already cracked in front of everyone who mattered to him. He spun toward me, his face flushed with anger. "What did you do, Lena?" he hissed. I met his glare without blinking. "I filed this morning," I said evenly. "You'll find your accounts inaccessible by now." He blinked, as if the words took time to reach him. "You froze my accounts?" His voice rose, splintering under the weight of disbelief. "You can't." "I already did." He took a step closer, the room stilling again around us. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" he spat. "Yes," I said. "Completely." He slammed his fist against the table, making the champagne glasses rattle. A few guests flinched. "You think this makes you strong," he shouted. "You'll regret this." I didn't move. "Maybe," I said softly, "but not tonight." The veins in his neck tightened as he searched the crowd for support, but the faces that had once smiled at him now looked away. Someone cleared their throat awkwardly. Another slipped out through a side door. The laughter, the music, the celebration gone. I watched him unravel piece by piece. The charm that once drew people in couldn't save him now. His mask had fallen, and beneath it was only desperation. A staff member approached cautiously, asking if everything was all right. Damon waved him off, muttering curses under his breath. I set my empty glass on the table and adjusted my clutch. "Enjoy the rest of your night," I said quietly. He stared at me, jaw tight, eyes full of disbelief. "You're walking away?" I met his gaze one last time. That's what freedom looks like. As I turned toward the exit, I caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass doors, alone, surrounded by the ruins of his own celebration. The man who once dictated every part of my life now stood powerless, watching me leave with everything he thought he owned. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of my new studio, painting golden streaks across bare wooden floors. The space smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee, a small mix of chaos and promise. Boxes lined the walls, filled with fabric samples, sketches, and supplies I'd been collecting quietly for years. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I stood at the center, a pen in my hand, the lease spread open on the drafting table. My name sat printed at the bottom, Lena Harrow Design. Seeing it written there made something inside me tighten, then ease. I signed it without hesitation, the ink gliding smoothly across the page. The sound of the pen tip scratching felt final, like the closing of one life and the beginning of another. Harlan had stopped by earlier with a briefcase full of paperwork confirming that the company's shares were now secure under my ownership. Damon hadn't contested the divorce. His pride wouldn't allow him to face another courtroom defeat. Word around town was that investors had withdrawn, projects had stalled, and his office sat half empty. He'd tried to rebuild, but without the charm of success behind him, people stopped answering his calls. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in seeing someone self-destruct, even someone who deserved it. But there was peace in knowing he could no longer touch me. The studio phone rang, my first client. A local boutique wanted help redesigning their space. The thought made me smile. I opened my sketchbook, the pages crisp, untouched. For the first time in years, I felt creative energy instead of anxiety. Freedom had a quiet sound. It was the hum of the city outside, the creak of wood beneath my feet, the slow rhythm of my own breathing. I hung one framed photo on the wall, me and my father, years ago, standing in front of his workshop. His arm was around my shoulders, his voice echoing in memory. "Build something that lasts, kiddo." I finally understood what he meant. The clock struck noon, and sunlight hit the small gold plaque by the door bearing my name. I caught my reflection in it, steady eyes, a faint smile. The woman staring back wasn't broken or waiting to be chosen. She was already whole. I sat at the desk, pulling out a stack of invoices and plans. Work awaited, and for once it was work that belonged entirely to me. My phone buzzed with a message from Harlan. "Congratulations, kid. You did it." I typed back simply, "Thank you." I leaned back, letting the quiet settle. Betrayal had carved deep scars, but they'd healed into something sharper, clarity. I glanced at the empty wall opposite my desk, imagining the company logo that would soon hang there. Then I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady, final. He gave me divorce papers for his birthday. I gave him bankruptcy for mine. Do you think I made the right choice walking away from him, or should I have given him another chance? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.